Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are doing well. This is the Rutherford Sports Network for August 12th, 2020. And as you're probably well aware, the other day, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 both decided to cancel fall football for this year and to push the football season into spring. Now, as of this moment, the Big 12, the ACC, and the SEC are all three still go for fall football for now. But that could change. Right now, as it stands, the fall football season would begin, if I'm not mistaken, as I check my calendar real quickly, September 26th would be the first weekend of football for colleges. Although I think there are a handful that are still holding out hope they could play, for Labor Day weekend. Here's what it boils all down to, folks. Liability. Legal liability. Now, I'm sure many of you will argue, well, these student athletes can sign waivers and all of this, and everything will be peachy keen. There's a problem with that, though. This is a very interesting time that we're living in, both from a historical perspective as well as a legal perspective. Now, if you're a basketball player, and let's say you're a college football player, and you're out on the field and suddenly lightning strikes you, that is considered an act of God out of the control of the university, so you really can't sue for that. However, this is very different. This is a situation where there is some control that universities and the associated college football programs can have over the situation. And if a university is not doing what a court believes is proper due diligence to protect the players from getting infected while having a college football season, then the truth of the matter is we have a very realistic prospect that we're going to see a lawsuit. Potentially many lawsuits. And this is what the NCAA is afraid of. And it's not just the legal liability that's the problem here. It's also the fact that several major college football players this past weekend said that they want to play football, but they also want to form a union to protect their interest. Now, we've been down this road before. A few years ago, Northwestern football players sought to create a union that was subsequently challenged in court by the NCAA, and the NCAA managed to win that particular battle. Now, whether or not they win battles down the road, well, that remains to be seen. I really think, though, that we're going to see a very significant change in the attitude of the courts because of this pandemic. And the pandemic, as I like to call it, the history-changing event that it is. You'll have to forgive me, I got to chew some gum to help with my digestion. I made the classic mistake again of eating something before doing a podcast. And, the tummy's not feeling too awful hot right now. So usually what I'll do is I'll actually chew gum to help with the digestion. So apologies if it sounds a little... This ain't a professional podcast. This is a hobby, folks, so bear with me. Okay. So in my humble opinion, we're probably not going to see college football this fall. I think the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12 in the next 2 or 3 weeks are going to have to make the decision that they can't have football. They'll push it back into February, and we'll have an abbreviated season. Maybe an expanded playoff of 8 to 12 to 16 teams, depending on how many conferences actually play football in the spring. So here's what is going to happen. We're not going to have a college football playoff in January. With the Big Ten and the Pac-12 out of the running, you're not going to get a college football playoff with the only three of the 5 Power 5 conference teams. And with the Big South already announcing that they're not playing, and more than likely a few other conferences, another Mid-American has already announced they're not playing, there will be other conferences that will announce shortly that they're not going to play. It may not be this week, it may be next week, it may be the week after, but I think with the risk still high, or high enough to where they're worried about legal liability, they're worried about potentially losing key players during the season, I really think it's going to be very unlikely we see college football this fall. Now this takes us down to high school football. And this is a very big issue. And not just high school football, but Division II, Division III, and community college and junior college football as well. What's going to become of them? Because football is a huge revenue generator for these programs. And if there's no football, there's probably no sports. And it's looking like college basketball may be iffy, at least until January. So, if this comes to pass, what will be the impact of this for the future? I really think that this is a very bad omen for sports right now. Because the NFL will be back, the NHL, Major League Baseball, the NBA will be back soon enough next season. Not this season, but the next season. If they have to postpone or cancel their seasons, they will be okay. There'll be some adjustments, of course, and such. They'll do everything they can to fit the season in, like they've done this, like Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NHL have done this summer. But high school students, you can't put in a bubble. College students in a Division II, Division III, and junior and community college level, you can't put into a bubble. Some of them are working. Some of them are going to be doing things outside of the classroom. So the risk is huge for high school athletics. But here, on the other hand, high school football is a huge revenue generator, like I said before, especially in rural areas where on Friday night, that's maybe the only live entertainment you have is a high school football game. So, in my honest opinion, I think what we're probably going to see is every attempt made to have some sort of high school football season this year, even if there are no playoffs, even if it's all conference games, you're probably going to see something like that this fall. Or, at worst case scenario, push into the spring. I think, truthfully, we're probably going to see high school football probably not start until late September, early October at the earliest, if it even starts at all. I think there could be some programs that decide not to play at all, or the county school boards or city school boards may decide not to play at all. There may not be enough players that come out for football to field a team, which is a possibility. So these are serious issues on local and state levels that are being addressed right now. North Carolina's High School Athletic Association, within the next hour, is supposed to announce their decision for fall sports. The rumor is it will be a delay in fall sports. How much of a delay remains to be seen. And it would not surprise me if they came out and said, we're going to have the season start in October, have a very shortened schedule, there'll be no playoffs, just a conference championship, and that'll be it. That means, not having playoffs is a pretty big deal, but to the NCAA, but at least high school teams will be able to get 3 or 4 home games, and that's huge. The problem, of course, is will there be crowds allowed at these games? If they're playing in empty stadiums, what's the point? If you don't have broadcast rights, you don't have broadcast money coming in for high school football, or if you do, it's small, very small. And that's a huge consideration with all of this, is can you have at least some people there? And that's a huge question right now. Because if you have a limit of 25% capacity, will they all stay apart? Do you have the band? Where do you put the band? Do you have the band separate from each other? These are huge considerations right now. Do you even need a band next year or this season for football? And that's going to mean a lot of band members are going to be missing out on potential scholarships, obviously the experiences and such. So yeah, it's a huge problem the high schools are facing right now. And I would not be surprised if some school state organizations decide to play football next spring. That'll be interesting to say the least. Now, the NFL. The NFL right now, as it is planning on doing, is going to have games in its stadiums. Some teams will not have fans at all. Some teams are planning to have 25% capacity, possibly expandable to 50%. But as of right now, there are no delays. I really have a feeling, though, that if colleges are delayed, high schools are delayed, it's going to be very hard for the NFL not to go, maybe we should delay a couple of weeks. It's one of those things that I really, really think, when you get right down to it, it's all about protecting the investments that these players have in the game, and the owners have in these players and whatnot. And investors tend to be risk averse. Well, the players want to play, knowing that if they get COVID-19, they're missing out on a bunch of money. Well, the owners want to play if players are missing from their rosters. Already the opt-out deadline is passed, but if there is a delay, they may bring it back. I still think that when all is said and done, we're more than likely going to get a delay. I just don't see how we can avoid a delay right now. I just don't think it's possible to avoid a delay right now. So, in the grand scheme of things, where does this take us? Where does this lead us? It leads us to the probability that we're not going to have college football until late September at the earliest, and more than likely not until next spring. I just think the risk of liability, plus the fact that you can't have fans in the stands, or not enough fans, is going to be a big problem. The NFL can survive it. They're already paid for because their expenses are already paid for, and they're going to make a profit anyway because of television revenue. But local owners, the team owners themselves, make a lot of money off of ticket sales. That's going to really hurt them, and that means they could have a hard time investing, not so much in players, but in upgrades of their stadium, upgrades of the stadium experience. That could see ramifications for years to come. But the biggest impact is at the high school and small college levels. What will we see? Will we see anybody play football this fall? Besides the NFL, possibly. And if we don't, what does that mean for high school football and other sports, especially in areas where the economy really is not doing that well, and wasn't doing that well before the pandemic? Those are questions that are going to have to be answered in the near future. And like I said, this is something that's not going to change. I mean, this time next year, things are not going to be back to the way they are. I predict that you're going to see a lot of colleges cut more sports. You're going to see a lot of high schools cut more sports. And I think that it'll go down the list. I could see high schools eliminating a lot of sports because of this. And not just that, but a lot of other extracurricular activities as well. Tax revenues are going to be down. The economy is not doing well at all. There's still a lot of unemployment, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty does not bode well for economic growth. So, in my humble opinion, I firmly believe we're going to see a major change in the sports world, at the very least at the high school and small college levels, and probably at the major college level as well. I think you're going to see some small college, mid-major universities decide to not have football and to concentrate more on basketball as a revenue-generating sport. High school football is expensive. College football is even more expensive considering the travel. It's much cheaper to travel to focus your efforts on college basketball, where you only have 12 players to worry about and a much smaller staff, than a football team where you've got 60, 70, maybe even more players than that traveling with you, plus the staff. You've got well over 100 some odd people. You've got to find hotels for them. You got to do all sorts of other things. So yeah, football is an expensive sport, and that's some of the considerations going on right now. So the next month is going to be very interesting, to say the least, from the perspective of those of us who love football. And also from the perspective of those who play other fall sports, what will become of their sports? Will they play in the spring? Will they have the funding to play in the spring? That's a very serious question that has to be addressed by these associations and will be addressed by these state associations in the near future. North Carolina is going to be making their decision within the next half hour or so. They're scheduled to make the announcement at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. I know some other states have already made their decisions. The southern states have not, from what I understand. So South Carolina has not made one. They've either said they're going to go ahead or they've not made a decision yet. Just because they've said they've gone ahead now doesn't mean they will go ahead later on. But I wanted to pop on here to talk about that because there's a lot going on in that discussion. And I wanted to give my viewpoint about it and hope you enjoy this podcast. I know it's a very stressful time for all of us, even those of us who still have jobs, even those of us who aren't being significantly impacted by the virus itself, either economically or whatnot, but there are plenty of people who have been. They've either caught the virus and known somebody who's caught the virus or known somebody who's died from it, whether it be a close family member or friend or whatnot. We're all impacted by this virus. And it's a very difficult time for all of us, and I hope that we can get out of this real quickly because, this has been, I would dare say, the most stressful time of my life outside of family considerations, with my mom passing away and whatnot. So, I hope that by the end of this year that we'll have come very close, if not actually putting this virus behind us. I have my doubts, but we shall see. Anyhow, I wanted to pop on here and talk about it, and I want to thank you for listening. And I hope you have a great day. As we always like to say here at RSN, good night, good luck, and may the good news be yours.